Hello students. So in today's session we are discussing about the rules of debit and credit. Okay. Before discussing the rules, I want to tell you something, that when we prepare any account, the left hand side is always a debit and the right hand side is always a credit. And for the purpose of recognition of rules of debit and credit, we categorize all the transactions in these 5 categories. As you can see that these 5 categories are based on accounting equation. So this is also called accounting equation approach. We can explain it as accounting equation approach. Like when assets increases, it is to be debited, and if it decreases, it is to be credited. And same with the expenses. When expenses increases or losses increases, it should be debited, and in case of decrease, it should be credited. But for liabilities, capital and revenue, the treatment is just reverse. When liability, capital and revenue increases, these are to be credited, and if it decreases, these are to be debited. So in nutshell, what we can say, that assets and expenses are debited when it increases and credited when it decreases. Liabilities, capital and revenue are credited when it increases and debited when it decreases. This is the simple rule. Now we study these transactions. Suppose started business with cash, the first transaction. In the first transaction, the accounts involved are cash and capital. Cash is an asset, and as we entered all the transactions from firm's point of view, so in this case assets are increasing, and that's why it should be debited, whereas capital is also increasing, that's why it should be credited. If we take next transaction, deposit with the bank, then what two accounts are involved? Cash and bank. So what we can see, that cash is an asset, bank is also an asset, but when we deposit money into the bank, the cash is decreasing whereas the bank is increasing. So it should be debited and it should be credited. And then when we talk about transaction 3, bought furniture, two accounts involved, furniture and cash, and both are assets. Both are assets. So this asset is increasing whereas this asset is decreasing. So we must debit the furniture and credit the cash. And when we talk about transaction 4, bought goods on credit, like purchases and who? Credit. Credit means supplier. And when we purchase goods on credit, that is our liability. And in this case, our liability is increasing. So we should credit it. Supplier should be credited, and purchases is an expense. It is also increasing. So it should be debited. So these are the ways through which transactions are identified and debit and credit rules are applied. Okay.